All right, everybody, we're back. So I got everything cleaned and wiped down. I got my sealer made. So let's turn the paint booth on and let's get the sealer. All right. You always want to have proper protection. You don't want to be breathing that stuff in. I'm gonna go turn the heat cycle on. Be right back. outlet is all down. I've put on all these parts. Sealers on the wheels. Now you can see. Let this dry, and in the meantime I'm gonna go make my paint. I'll see y'all in a bit. let that dry and put another 2 coats on it. See you then. All right, that would be 3 coats on the face of the wheels. I only kind of put 1 rough coat in here and 1 in the back. You're not going to see the back and you're not going to see in here. I just want paint coverage on it for protection. I still have to clear coat all this, so it's going to have more protection once the clear is on it. But the main part that you see, which is the front, is what I wanted to have the coverage on. So I'll go make some clear coat, and then while this is drying, and then I'll clear coat these bad boys. All right, clear coat time. So I want to talk to you briefly about the whole process, because it's obviously a bit more complicated than just. It's not complicated. There's more to it than just. Well, let me just sand. I'll just sand it down and then paint it and be. No, there's a lot of stuff that's involved with the whole process of painting anything, whether you're painting wheels, a piece of plastic trim, or the whole side of a car or a whole vehicle. A lot of it is prep work. Prep work is the most important part. How you do your prep work, how you good or bad, or a job you do on your prep work will come back to haunt you, bite you, or and affect how the job comes out, the paint job, unfortunately. So prep work is everything. So without doing a good job prepping, you're not going to get a good paint job. And prepping is everything from the sanding, how you sand, what grit paper you sand, and how good of a job you do sanding, because you could sand something if there's still an area that was still sort of shiny, paint shiny, and it wasn't sanded down enough, the paint could peel. And if you didn't clean the surface before you sand it, and even after you sand it, it could either leave dirt in the paint, or if it's greasiness, it could fisheye the paint, possibly even make paint lip, which again is not something you want. Especially if you're doing all this work to something you're willing to paint. You want it to come out nice. That's the whole point. So prep work is everything. I can't stress enough on how important prep work is. With those wheels, which you didn't see me do in the video because I didn't make a video of the prep work, unfortunately, I didn't think of it at the time, a lot of sanding. And because of how rough the wheels were, I use a really rough grit, 180 grit sandpaper to be exact. First, before even sanding it, I paint thinner to clean the wheel, then to grease the wheel with the 440 cleaner before even sanding it for prep work. Then after that was done, sanding and prepping it with thinner to get the dirt and everything off, paint thinner, then degreasing the wheel to get all the grease, most of the grease off. Then I started sanding it, and I sanded everything really thoroughly and really cautiously to make sure everything, the ears and nooks and crannies were 100% sanded and there were no shiny spots left. Because shiny spots is unprepped areas, and paint wants to stick to prepped areas. It doesn't stick to shiny, unprepped areas. That's how and where it peels. So everything was prepped with 180 grit thoroughly, and then after prepping with 180, sanding every nook and cranny of each and every wheel, front, back, side, everything. Then from there, I wiped it and cleaned it again with wax degreaser. Cleaned it all off. Good, blew it out. First blew off all the dust from sanding it. Then after blowing it off from 180 with the dust from sanding it 180, then I went to the cleaner again to degrease it. And from there, then I sanded it with a finer grit so I could get the 180 grit scratches out. I use a 320 grit. And what that does is it allows you to knock down the scratches so they're the more aggressive scratches are less visible. And when they're less visible, they don't show through the paint. And then from there, that's when I'll obviously from there blow it off again. I'll make sure all the dust and everything dirt's out of all the nooks and crannies. Then again, wipe it down with the prep saw. And that's from there is where I left off to we're in the booth. And once I got there in the booth is where I wiped it all down again with 440 twice. Front wheel, back of the wheel, side where all the lips are, inside where all the lips are, all that. Wiped it down twice to make sure I got everything good with that quality, good heavy duty waxing degreaser. Then from there, now you're ready for sealer or your primer and paint. And depending on how bad it is after it was all the body work done and prep work done, if you still felt you needed a little extra love on the part, you could sand the primer or sealer, whichever you're using at that point. Because some people will, if it's really bad, then they'll prime it, then they'll sand the primer down, blow it all off, clean it, drain it with wax degreaser, and then they'll seal it and then paint it. But since the wheels were pretty rough, but they weren't too bad, and the 180 grit really did the job getting it smooth and nice, I ended up 320ing it, wiping it all down like I said, blowing out, then wiping it down. Then I just went right to the sealer, and then the paint, and now I'm clearing. I have one more coat to put on. I'm gonna finish this off with 2 coats of clear coat. I'm using a 4-to-1 clear coat. It's a speed dry and clear, so this way I can get the wheels dry enough to take home today, hopefully after their bake cycle, or I might leave them overnight and then pick them up Monday or whatever and bring them back, because it's not like I can get the tires mounted on them until next week anyway. But they'll be done. So that being said, that's pretty much the whole process. And again, paint times, prep times, dry times for your paint, primer, sealers. Look at the cans. Most of it, if they're all the dry times and stuff for flash times for paint, sealers, and all that around the can itself. But I usually like to wait, I think 10-15 minutes in between coats, depending on if the sealer or the paint, clear or whatever. And this sealer usually dries pretty quick, so I wait about like 10-15 minutes before I put the base coat down. Then in between each coat of the color, probably about another 10-15 minutes, and then waited another 10-15 minutes for it to flash good, and then I cleared. Waiting about 15 minutes in general between the coats of clear. And now I'm going to put the last coat of clear on and then let it dry. Either I'll bake it on the bake cycle at 150 degrees for 30 minutes, or I'll let it dry overnight. Who knows? But I'll see you in a second. All right, I think we're all set with the clear coat, so let's go take a look and see how it came out. I got 2 coats of clear on everything. That's that. So I'm going to put this on bake cycle so it can dry a little quicker. That way we'll set this here, 35-minute bake at 140. There we go.